You are the hope that I cling to. You mean more than this world to me.
I wouldn't trade you for silver or gold.
I would not trade you.
Marriages are, something that, it's really something that, it doesn't matter how old you are. Marriage is a mysterious thing. It's like there's, each sex is like an alien form of life. It's one is just as foreign to the other. Even though they may have common things about them, they seem to be different creatures, And it's like when he separated the first woman from the first man, there was more than we realized that it was separated there. That as I've grown to be with my wife for all these decades, the wife of my youth, I was blessed to be able to stay with. It's been a wild ride, but if you're willing to defer your will to their will, the other person's will, there's no problems. It's only when selfishness enters the thing. And when somebody or they make ultimatums. Ultimatums are the worst because they feel like they have no power. So the only thing they can do is make an ultimatum. And it might be the man or the woman, but a lot of times it's the woman that's making the ultimatum because she feels so powerless. But she really does wield a lot of control that she maybe doesn't realize. But anyway, the thing of it is, though, we have to understand that in that bond, that covenant we make with our Creator, which is the Ten Commandments, it makes everything makes sense when you understand that selfishness is the thing that gets in your way with that too. If He's not enthroned on your heart and you're doing His will, then you got problems, And He even calls it a covenant of Hasid, which is sometimes translated as a covenant of love between Himself and His wife, Yisrael. Every country has within it families, and the families are either strong or they're weak. And if the families are weak, and that means the marriage is weak, because the family is only weak because the marriage is weak. And Rome declined due to a decline in the strength of the family unit. And population growth suffered as a result. And decadent moral behavior was the result of the decline of the family. In other words, we were just grabbing people and saying, let's hang out together. And then societies are showing the signs of family stress right now, especially this country. It seems like more and more this country that I live in the news, there's just bad news about families and marriage. People don't even want to get married because they hear such horrible stories. I mean, the woman at the well in John chapter 4. Remember that?
Yeah, that was beautiful.
There's that was a picture that I think he opened my mind to that, what was going on, and I noticed that the whole chapter practically was taken up with this conversation between this woman who was a Samaritan. In other words, she was from the northern tribes up north, and Yehuda, of course, he was from Yehuda. And I guess they gave themselves away by their accent and things, but also where they were. But you see, Yahusha was raised up in the north, so his affinity and knowledge of the northerners was no doubt very great. But he sat there at the well, and he talked to this woman and asked her to give him a drink. And she was stunned because this was a Jewish person, or a Yahudi, actually speaking to her. Not only that, but he was speaking to a woman, which was not normally done. A man and a woman. But he asked, for the drink, and the woman answered and said, "I have no husband." He'd said, "Bring me your husband, and I'd like to talk to him." And he said, "You've said well, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you have now is not your husband." what you have said is true. Now, these many husbands that Yahusha is talking about were literally men, but figuratively. See, there's that literal level, and then there's that figurative level. The many husbands in this teaching, I believe, were the false adulterous affairs of the lost tribes. And the teaching here is that Yahusha is calling back his wife from these dry wells that give the bride, and give his bride eternal life, because he has living water within himself. And the living water is that covenant that he wants to draw her back to, the covenant of marriage, So that was, I don't know if that's even clear yet or not, but it's pretty clear that if we understand the covenant, the Ten Commandments, being the thing that we have as a relationship with Yahuah, if we break with that covenant, then we have no relationship to him at all. We're without hope.
Yes.
But if you ask the question, what is marriage? We have to start really way back in Genesis or Bereshith chapter 2 and look at verse 18. It says, "And Yahuah Elohim said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I'm going to make a helper for him as his counterpart." And a counterpart can be thought of as a match, a mate, or an opposite part that completes the person, And then continuing, it says, "And from the ground Yahuah Elohim formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all livestock and to the birds of the heavens and to every beast of the field. But for the man there was not found a helper." Now the interesting thing is that word helper is the Hebrew word Ezer, which is in the man's name, Eliezer, the one that went out and found the wife for him as his counterpart. So Yahuah Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. And the rib which Yahuah Elohim had taken from the man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one is called Isha, because she was taken out of Adam, or the man. For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother and cleave to his Isha, and they shall become one flesh."
Not cleave to his ish.
Yeah, you don't want to cleave to your Steve or your John. You want to cleave to your Isha. Your Isha. An Ish cleaves to an Isha. A man cleaves to a woman, And it doesn't say you cleave to more than one woman, In the Jewish tradition, they get under a kuppah, which is like a little tent with no walls. And it's usually got 4 posts, and they get under this, and that represents the household that they're creating. It's just a representation, and it is a tent of sorts, and it is an emblem of a sukkah, really, because at the very end, when Yahusha comes back and we go into the sukkah, it's going to be a marriage, a marriage supper.
That's what tabernacle, is it?
Tabernacle, yeah. Abraham's son, Eliezer, the servant, finds this woman, and anyway, he didn't go back and take her to Abraham and say, "How do you like this for a bride?" He didn't get his father's opinion. He just met her, and it was here's what it says in Genesis 24, starting at verse 63. "And Yishak went out to meditate in the field in the evening, and he lifted his eyes and looked up and saw the camels coming. And Ribkah lifted her eyes, and when she saw Yishak, she dismounted from her camel, and she said to the servant," that would be Eliezer, "Who is this man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "It is my master." So she took a veil, that's a burqa, and covered herself. Now that was a cultural thing. And the servant, that's Eliezer, told Yishak all the matters that he had done. In other words, describing the circumstances of how he met her and negotiated with her older brother, being the one that he had to ask, apparently, because the father wasn't there. Because you have to get the some relative's permission, in that culture. And Yishak brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Ribkah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Yishak was comforted after his mother's death. Well, there wasn't a ceremony. It's just a matter of joining together, becoming a household. And that household is sometimes represented by the tent or the kuppah, or it can just be your house, where you live. But if you bring a girl home, and you join with her, you're married to her. The Roman procedure started out with a ceremony, and it was called conventio in manna, and it ended in a ceremony as well. So they had a breaking union, so they could divorce.
Well,
But so anyway, when the first step was to get permission. Well, he gave the woman gifts first. That was the first thing he did. So Abraham's eldest servant, Eliezer, when he met Ribkah, what happened in Genesis 24, verse 47 was, I asked her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. Then I put the nose ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. Now that's a nose ring and a bracelet, which were gifts that she was going to be able to keep, And obviously it was a symbol of the giver having great wealth. And it was probably astoundingly beautiful. These weren't just chunks of metal. And so anyway, the next thing that he had to do was go to the family, and if there was a father, find out if he could get permission for her to become a bride, a wife, or in that case, they had to ask the older brother. But anyway, the custom of wearing rings, though, you notice it was a nose ring and a bracelet, but it wasn't a ring for a finger. That custom comes from pagans. And a lot of people that wear wedding rings are doing something that actually relates to the Roman deity of love and fertility, Venus. And the third finger of the left hand was believed to have a vein in it, which it does. Actually, they all do. And it was believed that it went all the way to the heart. Imagine that. Veins connected to the heart. Wow. Well, they all are. But anyway, the ring in marriage on the left hand honored this deity, Venus, and rings were not worn by husbands at all until the 20th century.
20th century, wow.
Century. And of course, we think it's something completely normal. Anyway, the pagan custom of throwing rice at a wedding, people that do that, it symbolized semen, and it was believed to ensure fertility. Well, that's the kind of pagan practice. It's simply monstrous.
Yeah.
But he wants. But Yahuah is trying to get his tribes back from the nations, and he's trying to get them to listen to him from where they are. And here we are. I'm in North America. You're in Australia, and of course we're on opposite sides of the earth, as are many of the Nazarene that are coming back to the covenant, and we're realizing who we are, and that he's calling us back to his heart and his mind, and he's searching out our hearts and minds, and he knows that we're willing servants and we want to obey him, and all we have to do is just meditate on his Torah day and night, speak of it in our house, and when we rise up and when we lie down and so forth. And sometimes when I'm driving, I'll just start reciting the Ten Commandments just from memory as I'm driving along. What better? That's a form of prayer too. because you're in union with him when you're doing that. Because you can't not think about him. You know, it's like a bride thinking about her husband that is gone away. You know, and the Song of Solomon is a song. Actually, the Song of Solomon is something that is loaded with Yahuah's love for his bride. You know, I gave you a little text of that in an email. Remember?
That's right.
Where is your beloved? Where is your beloved gone? You know, and we yearn for him to come back. This is really interesting. I had a couple of quotes that I had from some people that are contemporary living people today. This is from the United States Supreme Court, and this is the Supreme Court of the land. This is a quote: "Marriage has more to do with the morals and civilization of a people than any other institution." That's an interesting thing coming from a Supreme Court. And then Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, she said, quote, "We need to protect traditional marriage." And they're fighting against it all the time. "We should not allow some states to impose their definition of marriage on other states." And former President George W. Bush said, "Marriage is a sacred institution between a man and a woman." Now, another person that was really insightful about all the problems that society's having all over the world, really, is Maggie Gallagher. She said, quote, "When men and women fail to form stable marriages, the result is a vast expansion of government attempts to cope with the terrible social needs that result. There is scarcely a dollar that the state and federal government spends on social programs that is not driven in large part by family fragmentation, crime, poverty, drug abuse, teen pregnancy, school failure, mental and physical health problems," unquote. And that's so true.
That's happening.
Yeah. And as far as on the level between Yahuah and Israel being divorced, because the 10 tribes didn't obey the covenant, they were carried away into the nations, and they've never been brought back. They've been dispersed, and they literally became the nations. And it's recorded for us here in Jeremiah, or Jeremiah 3.
Hallelujah.
So the restoration is all about us re-enjoining to the covenant, and we're realizing that. And you know, this battle we see in the court system and all over about the 10 Commandments and classrooms and all that. This restoration can't occur unless we enjoin to the covenant, you know. Now, if you want to know about divorce, Yahuah hates divorce, so don't go there. Usually it's based on selfishness, you know, and those ultimatums and trying to manipulate each other. Come on. But Malachi 2, verses 14 through 16, 2 verses. "Yet you say, why? Because Yahuah has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, against whom you have dealt treacherously. Yet she is your companion and the wife of your covenant. And did he not make one? And he had the remnant of the Spirit?" And it says, "And what is the one alone? He seeks a seed of Elohim. Therefore, take heed to your spirit, and let none deal treacherously against the wife of his youth. For I hate divorce, said Yahuah Elohim of Israel, and the one who covers his garment with cruelty. And you, said Yahuah of hosts, so you shall guard your spirit, and do not act treacherously." So we shouldn't act treacherously toward one another either. Even when we're dealt with treacherously, we return that with kindness and understanding, and try to be deferent and considerate of the other person, you know, that's losing it. They're usually losing it because they're struggling or they're wrestling. I see people all the time that are at different stages of development, and they're wrestling, and they come across as being hateful or judgmental, and they seem to be attacking you or what you're saying, but really they're struggling with it, and they're pleading for you to come up with something that'll convince them, you know. And that's really what that is.
That's
And I
really good.
wrestle with them, but I just let them here you go, wrestle all you want until you get it.
Mm.
And sometimes we can take it personally, but you don't take anything personally.
Yeah.
Because you know they're wrestling. And by the two of you creating the household, you don't need external help to do that. So you actually create your own household by, the joining together. Now, the idea of if there's fornication or adultery or whatever by one of the two people, and the person, admits that they were weak and they fell, and then they say, well, I made a mistake, and I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to change my ways. And the other partner is willing to keep them and accept them in spite of that. Then that other partner is being more like Yahuah than they realize. Because that's exactly what Yahuah is like. He'll take that fornicating or adulterous bride right back because he's a forgiving, kind creator. And, some of us have come from various backgrounds. Some of us have come from Catholicism or some derivative of that through Baptists or Lutherans or Presbyterians or all these denominations, Pentecostals, and learned all these different patterns. And some people have actually been raised in Wicca. If you have marital problems, you're the first person that you should go to is Yahusha. He's the one that brought you together. And he has the solution as to how to fix the problem. And then you should go to the mate, your spouse, and say, I want to recommit myself to you. I've been just expecting lately. My mind's just been going in another direction, apparently. But I haven't been focused on you. And you're the most important thing in my life, next to Yahusha. And I need to take time and redevelop that relationship, because that's what you were saying earlier this morning. You were saying that it was a matter of people just going home. You should hug your spouse when you leave for work, and you should hug your spouse when you come home from work. And I mean hold them, really hold them, so that you remember it all day. And then your arrival back home together, you're back, because your home is your spouse. It doesn't matter whether you're driving around in a caravan or not. That's your home because you're with your spouse. I've always told Phyllis that. I said, no matter where we go, if we're out taking care of an errand, going to the post office with a big shipment to send around the world, I've told her, I'm home right then because she's my home. And I'm her home. And we tell each other that. The story ends, that would be the history of the world, does end with marriage. So, and it's interesting because let's read Revelation 19, starting at verse 5. And a voice came from the throne saying, praise our Elohim, all you his servants, and those who fear him, both small and great. And I heard as the voice of a great crowd, as the sound of many waters, and as the sound of mighty thunder, saying, Hallelujah, for Yahuah El Shaddai reigns. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife prepared herself. And to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteousnesses of the set-apart ones. And he said to me, Right, blessed are those who have been called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of Elohim. And that's so true. Not everybody's going to be there. So he wants us so badly to accept his sacrifice and his life,
And he's very jealous, isn't he? He's always trying to get our attention.
Yes,
Yeah.
he certainly is. Yeah. And he's really going to get the earth's attention when he closes the trap.
Yeah.
And we've done all that we can do.
Mm.
You know, a lot of people think it's over when we die, and to an extent, that's probably true. There's some things that we don't know yet, though, because see, he can speak to those that are in the grave. We can't. You know, we're bound. We're not supernatural in our ability. He is. See, he can speak to the dead. But let's not count on that. Let's assume that we're going to have to do a certain amount of work here while we're in our flesh, and we're going to actually receive rewards for what we have done in our flesh. And by the words that we speak, every single word that we speak that is either building up or tearing down. And that's why I'm so concerned about the people that are tearing down. Because if we're working against one another, then what is he going to say about that? You know, we have to be very careful with our words and be very patient with the other members of the body. When you look at marriage as a lifetime commitment, a human lifetime isn't that long, and you can get through it. It's actually, for me, my marriage has been a wonderful experience, and we've had our ups and downs. That's true. Everybody does. But the thing of it is, on the whole, marriage is the best choice to make, and make that commitment rather than just living together and saying, "Oh, we're not really married," you know. They just don't understand, you know.
Yeah.
But, raising righteous offspring, you know, be fruitful and multiply. That command stands, and I think it was one of the first ones. So, you know, we should do that, you know. And he doesn't want to just make offspring. He wants to be fruitful and multiply, you know, and also raise the righteousness in our children, because we have to teach them and train them in his righteousness, you know, not some secular ideals.
Making substitutions, and your name they won't call. Making substitutions, another they install. They're making truth their pride.